I sat on the edge of the rusted folding chair, listening to the agonizing rhythm of my wife's breathing. Inhale. A wet, rattling pause. Exhale. It sounded like crushed glass in her lungs. Sarah's skin, once the color of warm honey, was now a translucent, bruised purple. The dialysis machine we had rented, secondhand and constantly malfunctioning, hummed a pathetic, dying tune in the corner. Above us, the ceiling thumped. The heavy, rhythmic bass of a bespoke sound system vibrated through the exposed wooden beams, shaking flakes of dust onto Sarah's thin blanket. They were having a party. Another one. Upstairs, in the $5 million mansion that my life savings had paid for, my son David and his wife Chloe were hosting a charity gala for underprivileged youth. The irony tasted like battery acid in the back of my throat. I had given David everything. When he came to me 3 years ago, crying, begging for the seed money to start his tech firm, I didn't hesitate. I liquidated my retirement. I sold the family estate. I handed him a check for $2 million. Just for a year, Dad, he had promised, tears in his eyes. You and Mom can stay in the basement suite just until the IPO hits. Then I'll buy you a palace. The IPO had hit. He was on the cover of Forbes, and Sarah and I were still in the dark, shivering next to a leaking water heater. Sarah coughed. It wasn't a normal cough. It was a violent, whole-body spasm that practically lifted her off the frail cot. A streak of crimson stained the white tissue I pressed to her lips. My heart slammed against my ribs. Her kidneys were failing. The doctor had been clear yesterday morning. What? If she doesn't get the emergency transplant protocol by tonight, she won't make it to Monday. We needed $50,000 for the hospital deposit. $50,000. To the man upstairs pouring $1,000 champagne into crystal flutes, it was pocket change. I squeezed Sarah's freezing, skeletal hand. "I'll be right back, my love," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm going to talk to David. I'm going to get the money." She couldn't even nod. Her eyes rolled back, fluttering weakly. Time was out. I stood up. My knees popped, aching from the cold. I looked down at my clothes, a faded flannel shirt and patched corduroy trousers. I looked like a vagrant. I took a deep breath, swallowed the massive lump of pride that had kept me silent for 3 years, toward the wooden stairs. I pushed open the door to the main house. The contrast was violently blinding. The foyer was a sea of glittering chandeliers, marble floors, the overwhelming stench of expensive Tom Ford perfume. Women in backless silk gowns and men in tailored Italian tuxedos laughed, holding tiny plates of caviar. I stepped into the light. The laughter nearest to me died instantly. Guests stared. A woman in a red dress visibly recoiled, pulling her diamond-draped arm closer to her chest as if I were a diseased rat that had crawled out of the sewer. "Excuse me, I muttered, keeping my head down, navigating through the sea of judgment. "Excuse me, I need to find David." I spotted him near the grand fireplace. He was holding court, a glass of amber scotch in one hand, gesturing grandly with the other. He looked handsome. He looked exactly like I did at his age. It made me sick. Beside him stood Chloe. She wore a stunning, skin-tight emerald gown that likely cost more than Sarah's life-saving procedure. Diamonds dripped from her neck. She was laughing, her perfect white teeth flashing. I pushed through the final row of executives. "David," I said. My voice was raspy dry. He stopped mid-sentence. He turned. The smile melted off his face, replaced instantly by a flush of absolute, visceral embarrassment. "Dad?" he hissed, stepping forward quickly to block his guest's view of me. "What the hell are you doing up here? I told you tonight was a VIP event." "It's your mother," I said, my voice cracking. I didn't care about the guests. I didn't care about his pride. "David, she's coughing up blood. She's fading. I need the money for the hospital. The deposit. Now." David glanced nervously over his shoulder. The investors were watching. "Dad, Keep your voice down. We'll talk about this tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. I grabbed his tuxedo sleeve. My dirty fingernails dug into the pristine black wool. She will die tonight, David. I gave you everything. I need $50,000. Right now. Suddenly, a sharp, manicured hand slapped my wrist. Hard, I let go, stunned. Chloe stepped between us. Her eyes were cold, dead, and utterly devoid of humanity. "Don't you dare touch his suit with your filthy hands," she spat, her voice a venomous whisper. "Chloe, please," I begged. I was a desperate man. I was breaking. "Sarah is dying in your basement. We need the money." Chloe let out a short, mocking laugh. It was a sound of pure evil. She looked me up and down, her lips curling into a sneer of absolute disgust. "Money?" she asked, her voice raising just enough for the nearest guests to hear. "Are you deaf? Or just senile, old man? We are hosting a gala. Do you know how much the caterers cost? I need that cash for the silent auction, not a dying woman's lost cause." I froze. The words hit me like a physical punch to the gut. "A lost cause?" I choked out. "She is his mother. She carried him. She bled for him. We bought this house. You bought a shack." Chloe snapped back, stepping into my space. "David turned it into an empire. You gave him a measly $2 million. We make that in a week now. You're just a leech. A pathetic, obsolete leech sucking the life out of my husband." I looked at David. I expected him to defend me. I expected him to slap her. I expected the boy I raised to emerge from that tuxedo and protect his dying mother. David looked at the floor. Then he looked at his investors. He straightened his jacket. "She's right, Dad," David said. His voice was flat, empty. My heart stopped. "What?" "You're ruining my night. You're embarrassing me," David said, his jaw tightening. "You've been living here rent-free for 3 years. You're a drain on our resources. I'm tired of the smell. I'm tired of the medical equipment, tripping the circuit breakers." The betrayal was a knife twisting in my spine. "David," I whispered, "she will die. Then let her die somewhere else," Chloe screamed. The music stopped. The entire room went dead silent. Every eye was on us. Chloe pointed a diamond-studded finger at the front door. "I am sick of looking at you. I am sick of smelling you. Pack your trash, both of you. Get out." "It's pouring rain," I pleaded, the panic finally shattering my composure. "It's freezing outside. She can't walk. Then drag her." David barked. He didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and shoved me. Hard, I stumbled backward, my worn shoes slipping on the polished marble. I crashed into a tray of champagne glasses. Crystal shattered. Wine spilled like blood across the white floor. Laughter. Someone in the crowd actually laughed. "Security," David yelled. 2 massive men in black suits materialized from the shadows. They grabbed me by the arms, their grips like iron vices. "No, wait, let me get her." I thrashed. I fought. But I was an old man, and they were brutes. They dragged me toward the basement door. I fought wildly as we descended the stairs. When we reached the bottom, Chloe was already there. She had taken the back stairs. She marched over to the cot. "No! Don't touch her!" I screamed. Chloe grabbed the thin blanket and ripped it off. Sarah gasped, her eyes flying open in terror, grabbed my frail, dying wife by the collar of her nightgown and yanked her upward. Sarah cried out, a weak, pathetic sound that broke my soul into 1,000 pieces. "Out!" Chloe shrieked, kicking the Eevee stand over. It crashed to the concrete floor, shattering the saline bags. The security guards dragged me up the main stairs. Chloe and David dragged my wife. They didn't let us pack. They didn't let me grab her coat. They dragged us through the kitchen, toward the servants' entrance at the back of the mansion. The door flew open. The wind howled. The storm was brutal. Freezing rain whipped sideways in the pitch blackness. They threw me first. I hit the wet pavement, scraping the skin off my palms and knees. Then they threw Sarah. She collapsed beside me like a discarded rag doll. She hit the asphalt hard, her head bouncing slightly. She didn't even have the strength to cry. She just curled into a ball, violently, shivering violently as the freezing rain instantly soaked through her thin cotton nightgown. I scrambled to her. I threw my body over hers to shield her from the storm. I looked up. David stood in the doorway. He looked down at us. The warm, golden light of the mansion framed him. "Don't ever come back," David said. His eyes were dead. Chloe stepped up beside him. She held something in her hand. My old, battered wallet. She pulled out a single, crumpled $20 bill, my last bit of cash, and pocketed it. Then, she tossed the empty leather wallet into a muddy puddle at my feet. "Consider the $20 a cleaning fee for the basement," Chloe sneered. She reached out and pulled the heavy oak door. Aslam. The lock clicked, the light disappeared. We were in total darkness. The rain lashed against my back. The cold seeped into my bones. Beneath me, Sarah's breathing grew shallower. Fainter. "Sarah. Sarah, stay with me," I sobbed, pulling her wet, freezing body into my arms. I rocked her on the wet asphalt. "Please, please, God, no." I looked at the massive, glowing mansion. I heard the faint thumping of the bass resuming. The party was back on. They were drinking champagne while my wife was dying in the mud. Tears of sorrow mixed with the freezing rain on my face. But as I held her shaking body in the dark, the sorrow began to curdle. The desperate, begging father died right there on the pavement. In his place, something else woke up. Something cold, something ancient, something I had buried deep inside myself 20 years ago when I decided to play the role of a humble, normal family man. I touched Sarah's icy forehead. "Hold on, my love," I whispered to the storm. "Just hold on." I looked back up at the penthouse window. My hands balled into fists. The sadness evaporated. Pure, unadulterated rage flooded my veins like liquid fire. They thought I was just an old, destitute man. They thought I was weak. They had no idea. They had absolutely no idea who they had just thrown out into the dark. And by God, I was going to make them pay. I was going to take everything. The storm raged on, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. I only felt the burning need to destroy them. The alleyway was a canyon of shadows, reeking of rotting cabbage and stale urine. Dragged Sarah step by agonizing step, her arm draped over my shoulder, my own knees buckling under our combined weight. The storm had passed, leaving behind a biting, bone-chilling dampness that clung to our wet clothes. We found shelter under the concrete overpass of the 5th Street Bridge. It was a graveyard of discarded humanity. Broken shopping carts, shattered glass. When shivering silhouettes huddled under damp cardboard, I found a relatively dry patch of dirt behind a rusted dumpster. I laid Sarah down gently. She was barely conscious, her breath coming in shallow, ragged wheezes that terrified me. Her lips were blue. I scavenged the alley, my hands sifting through absolute filth until I found 2 large, intact black garbage bags. I tore holes in the bottoms and pulled them over Sarah, wrapping her shivering frame in the plastic to trap whatever fading body heat she had left. "I'm sorry," I choked out, tears mixing with the grime on my face as I tucked the plastic around her icy feet. "I am so sorry, Sarah." She didn't open her eyes. She just let out a weak, agonizing moan. The sun came up, but it brought no warmth, only the harsh, unforgiving light of reality. We were homeless, we were penniless, and my wife was dying. I spent the next 3 days in hell. I became a ghost. The city that I had quietly helped build, the city whose skyline was funded by my shadow investments decades ago, now stepped over me as if I were a stain on the sidewalk. I found an old, dented tin cup near a storm drain. I sat on the corner of 8th and Elm, 3 blocks from the overpass, and held it out. I swallowed every ounce of pride I had cultivated over a lifetime. I begged. "Please," I croaked to passing suits. "My wife, she needs a doctor, please." Most didn't look down. Some sidestepped me with looks of utter disgust. One young hotshot in a tailored suit, The kind of kid David used to be. Kicked my cup by accident, sending the 3 pennies I had collected rolling into the gutter. He didn't even apologize. He just wiped his leather shoe on the concrete and kept walking. By the 4th night, Sarah's skin had turned an alarming shade of yellow. The kidney failure was entering its final stage. Toxins were flooding her brain. She stopped recognizing me. She kept murmuring about a garden we used to have in our first home, back when David was just a toddler holding my thumb. It broke me. Every word was a hammer to my shattered heart. I needed help. I dragged myself up, grabbed my tin cup, and walked toward the wealthy district. I planted myself outside Le Petit Oiseau, the most exclusive, ridiculously overpriced French restaurant in the city. It was the kind of place where a steak cost more than what most families made in a week. I sat against the brick wall, shivering in my dirty flannel shirt, holding my cup. An hour passed. The valet brought around a gleaming midnight black Lexus. The heavy glass doors of the restaurant swung open. Laughter spilled out onto the street. Warm, arrogant laughter. My blood ran instantly cold. It was David. He was wearing a brand new Armani suit, his hair slicked back perfectly. On his arm was Chloe. She was draped in a pure white mink coat, her neck heavy with a new string of pearls. But it wasn't just the 2 of them. Chloe was leaning into another man, a tall, slick-looking executive with silver hair. She was laughing loudly, her hand resting intimately on the man's chest, her fingers playing with his tie. David was walking slightly ahead, oblivious, checking his phone. I watched, sick to my stomach. "Oh, stop it, Richard," Chloe purred, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "You know David is entirely too busy with the merger to take me to Paris. But I suppose someone has to keep me company on the Riviera next month, where," she winked at the man, "right behind my son's back." David looked up from his phone. "Did you say something, babe?" "Just telling Richard how grateful we are for the bridge loan, honey," she lied smoothly, stepping away from the executive and looping her arm back through David's. The sheer, brazen audacity of it made me nauseous. She was playing him for a fool, and he was too blinded by greed to see it. They walked toward the valet. They were going to walk right past me. I stood up. I didn't plan it. My body moved before my brain could stop it. "David," my voice was gravelly, weak, but cut through the crisp night air. David stopped dead in his tracks. He turned. His eyes widened, taking in my matted hair, my dirt-caked face, the shivering, pathetic mess I had become. Chloe let out a theatrical gasp, pulling her white mink tighter around her shoulders. "Oh my God, it's him. What is he doing here? He smells like a sewer, Dad," David hissed, looking around frantically to see if Richard or the valet had noticed. "Are you insane? You followed us?" "I didn't follow you," I rasped, stepping forward. I held out my shaking hands. "David, it's your mother. She's unconscious. She won't wake up, please. I don't care what you do to me. Let me wash your floors. Let me disappear. Just give me enough to get her into the ER." David looked at me. For a split second, a fraction of a heartbeat, I saw the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I saw a flicker of guilt. Then, Chloe stepped in. "Don't you dare give him a dime, David," she snapped. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it burned. "You listen to me, you pathetic old stray. We just spent 10 grand on dinner to secure a merger. We are moving into the billionaire bracket. We do not have time for your sob stories." "She is dying," I screamed. My voice cracked. "Good," Chloe snapped back. "It'll save us the nursing home fees we were never going to pay anyway." I lunged. I didn't even think. I just reached for her. David shoved me hard in the chest. I flew backward, crashing into the brick wall and sliding down to the pavement. My shoulder exploded in pain. My tin cup clattered onto the concrete. "Stay away from my wife," David yelled. He stood over me. His chest heaved. The guilt was gone. Only a sick, bloated arrogance remained. You chose this, Dad, David said, his voice dripping with condescension. You chose to be a failure. I built an empire. I'm a titan. You're just a bum begging outside my favorite restaurant. Chloe sneered. She reached into her designer clutch. She pulled out a single, shiny copper penny. She tossed it. It hit me right in the forehead and bounced into my lap. Here, she spat. Go buy a mansion. Just keep your filthy hands off my Lexus. They turned around. They got into the car. The valet closed the door. The engine roared and the tires squealed, splashing a puddle of dirty street water all over my legs as they sped off into the night. I sat there in the mud. The penny burned a hole in my palm. I didn't cry. The tears were gone. Suddenly, a terrifying realization slammed into me. Sarah. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my shoulder. I ran. I ran faster than my old legs had moved in 20 years. I pushed past pedestrians, dodging traffic, running blindly back to the overpass. Sarah! Sarah! I yelled as I slid down the muddy embankment. I ripped the black garbage bags away. She was perfectly still. Her chest wasn't moving. Panic, cold and sharp as a razor, sliced through my chest. I fell to my knees. I pressed 2 fingers to her neck, a pulse, weak, faint, fluttering like a dying moth. But it was there. No, 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 I chanted. I scooped her up. She weighed nothing. She was just bones and cold skin. I carried her. 3 miles. I walked, stumbled, and dragged myself through the city streets, ignoring the cramps tearing through my calves and the agonizing burning in my lungs. I carried her until my arms went numb. I reached the blazing red neon sign of St. Jude's Medical Center. I burst through the sliding glass doors of the emergency room. The bright, sterile lights blinded me. Help, I screamed. My wife, she's dying. Help me. Nurses turned. Security guards flinched. The waiting room, filled with people with sprained ankles and flu symptoms, went dead silent. A triage nurse, a stern-looking woman with a clipboard, rushed from behind the glass counter. Put her on the gurney, she ordered, pointing to a bed against the wall. I laid Sarah down gently. The nurse took one look at us. Our filthy clothes, the stench of the streets, the absolute squalor we wore like a second skin. Her expression hardened. She checked Sarah's pulse, then flashed a pen light into Sarah's unresponsive eyes. She's an end-stage renal failure, the nurse said flatly. She needs immediate dialysis and a transplant protocol. Yes, please. Do it, I begged, grabbing the metal rail of the bed. The nurse looked at me, her eyes cold and bureaucratic. Name, Arthur. Arthur Vance. This is Sarah. She typed quickly into a tablet. Insurance? I don't have any, I stammered. My son, he took it all. Just admit her, please. The nurse stopped typing. She looked up. The professional empathy vanished, replaced by a wall of institutional ice. Mr. Vance, I'm sorry, but this is a private facility. The transplant protocol requires a mandatory $50,000 deposit for uninsured patients before we can authorize an emergency bypass. She is dying right in front of you. I slammed my fist on the mattress. Security, the nurse called out immediately, taking a step back. 2 massive guards in blue uniforms stepped up behind me. Sir, calm down, one of them warned, his hand resting on his baton. I don't have the money right now, I pleaded, my voice breaking, the tears finally returning. I fell to my knees right there on the sterile linoleum floor. I clasped my hands together. Please, I am begging you. I will wash dishes. I will clean your toilets. Just save my wife. Let her die because I am poor. Please, the nurse sighed, annoyed. Sir, we are not a charity. The county hospital is 6 miles downtown. Take her there. She won't survive the trip, I screamed. That is not my problem, the nurse said coldly. Escort them out. They're disturbing the paying patients. The guards grabbed my arms. They yanked me up. They pushed the gurney toward the exit. No! Stop! Don't touch her. I fought, but I was exhausted. I was broken. They pushed us out the sliding doors. The automatic doors shut behind us with a quiet, final hiss. We were back in the cold, back in the dark. I looked at Sarah. Her breathing was so shallow, it was almost invisible. The monitor beeped in my head, counting down the last minutes of her life. I looked at the glass doors. I looked at the security guards glaring at me from the other side. I looked at the shiny copper penny still clenched in my filthy hand. The penny Chloe threw at me. "You chose to be a failure." David's voice echoed in my mind. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath of the cold city air. I had spent 20 years pretending to be Arthur Vance, the humble mechanic. I had buried my past so deep I almost forgot it existed. I did it for Sarah. She wanted a simple life. She wanted a normal family. I gave up an empire of blood, power, and limitless wealth to give her peace. But the world doesn't respect peace. The world only respects power. I opened my eyes. The tears stopped. The begging stopped. I reached into the inner lining of my torn, filthy coat, ripped the seam open with my teeth. From deep inside the fabric, wrapped in plastic and untouched for 2 decades, I pulled out a heavy, encrypted satellite phone. It was time to wake up. The heavy, encrypted satellite phone felt alien in my cracked, bleeding hands. It was a brick of matte black titanium, untouched for 20 years. I had sewn it into the lining of this coat the day I promised Sarah I would leave the shadows behind. She had hated the man I was. She hated the ruthless, bloodless titan who crushed competitors and bought governments. She wanted a husband. She wanted a father for David. So I buried Arthur Vance, the founder of Vanguard Holdings. I became Artie, the quiet mechanic, but Artie couldn't save her. Artie was a beggar in the mud. I pressed my thumb to the biometric scanner. A tiny LED light blinked red, scanning my print, reading the blood flow. Clinic. The screen glowed a cold, pale green. No signal bars, no service provider, just a direct uplink to a satellite I owned, orbiting 300 miles above the Earth. I hit the single programmed button. It rang once. "Vanguard Protocol," a voice answered. It was deep, calm, and rigidly professional. It was Marcus, my shadow, my right hand. He hadn't aged a day in his mind, even if 20 years had passed. "Marcus," I rasped. My voice was a hollow, broken thing, silence on the line. A heavy, deafening silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Sir, Mr. Vance, is it really you?" "It's me, Marcus. Sir, we thought you were dead. We've maintained the holding company, grown the assets as instructed. But I need an extraction." I cut him off. The sorrow was draining out of me, replaced by a cold, metallic focus. "St. Jude's Medical Center. South entrance. Sarah is dying. End-stage renal failure. They refused her entry." "Understood, sir," Marcus said. The shock vanished, instantly replaced by the lethal efficiency I had hired him for. "Assets are mobilizing. What is the threat level?" "No physical threat, just institutional arrogance. Bring the chief of surgery. Bring the board of directors. If they aren't awake, wake them up. If they resist, buy the hospital. T is 8 minutes, sir. Hold your position." The line went dead. I slipped the phone back into my torn pocket. I looked through the sliding glass doors of the ER. Sarah was still lying on the gurney just inside the vestibule, where the guards had abandoned her. Her chest was barely rising. Across the city, I knew exactly what was happening. While my wife lay dying on a cold linoleum floor, my son's wife was tangled in silk sheets in a $5,000 penthouse suite at the Four Seasons. Chloe poured a glass of Dom Perignon, letting the bubbles spill over the crystal rim. "Richard." She handed it to Richard, the silver-haired executive she had been flirting with outside the restaurant. He was sitting in a velvet armchair, his shirt unbuttoned, laughing softly. "You're a wicked woman, Chloe," Richard murmured, pulling her onto his lap. She giggled, a sharp, venomous sound. "I'm a pragmatist, Richard. David is a useful idiot. He thinks he's a wolf on Wall Street because I tell him he is, but he's soft. He still cries about his pathetic parents in the basement. Richard smirked, trailing a finger down her neck. And the bridge loan? He really thinks his company is securing the Vanguard contract tomorrow? He's absolutely delusional, Chloe sneered, sipping her champagne. He leveraged the house, the company, everything on this deal. He thinks he's a genius. But once he signs the debt over, we funnel the liquid assets into the offshore account, and I file for divorce. He'll be left with nothing but his sick mother's medical bills. And you? I, Chloe purred, kissing his jawline, will be on a yacht in Monaco with you. Let the boy rot with his trash family. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The caller ID flashed. David Hubby. Chloe rolled her eyes, put a finger to her lips to silence Richard, and answered with a sickeningly sweet voice. Hi, baby. Oh, I'm just leaving the charity board meeting now. It was exhausting. I miss you so much. Yes, the Vanguard deal is in the bag. You're amazing, honey. Go to sleep. I'll be home soon. She hung up and tossed the phone onto the floor. Like taking candy from a blind, stupid baby, she whispered. Back in the cold, I stood outside the sliding glass doors. The triage nurse, the one who had ordered us out, was sitting at her desk, sipping a gourmet coffee, casually scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, saw me standing in the dark, and rolled her eyes. She picked up her desk phone, clearly calling security again. I didn't move. The air pressure dropped. A low, rhythmic thumping echoed through the city canyons. It vibrated in my chest. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound grew deafening. The streetlights flickered. Suddenly, blinding white spotlight cut through the heavy rain clouds, sweeping across the hospital parking lot. The wind whipped up into a violent frenzy, racement sending garbage cans and loose branches flying across the asphalt. A matte black Sikorsky S-76 helicopter descended from the sky like a bird of prey. Inside the ER, the nurse dropped her phone. The coffee spilled across her desk. The two massive security guards who had thrown me out ran to the glass doors, their eyes wide with panic. The helicopter didn't land on the roof. Reveal. It landed right in the middle of the ambulance bay, completely blocking the entrance. Before the rotors even slowed down, the roar of massive engines tore through the street. 4 armored Cadillac Escalades, blacked out and heavily modified, came screeching around the corner. They jumped the curb, tires smoking, and formed a tactical perimeter around the hospital entrance. The doors flew open. A dozen men in tailored black suits stepped out. They moved with terrifying synchronized precision. No flashing police lights, no badges, just pure, intimidating, privatized power. The ER doors slid open. The security guards stood frozen, their hands hovering near their batons, completely outmatched. From the lead SUV stepped Marcus. He wore a 3-piece charcoal suit. An earpiece curled behind his ear. Reger. He held a silver briefcase in one hand. He ignored the guards. He ignored the flashing lights of the helicopter. He walked straight through the rain, his eyes scanning the area until they locked onto me. I was covered in mud. I smelled like a sewer. My flannel shirt was torn, and blood from my scraped knees stained my pants. Marcus stopped 2 feet in front of me. He didn't blink. He didn't show an ounce of pity or disgust. He bowed his head. Mr. Vance, Marcus said, his voice carrying over the roar of the helicopter. It is an honor to see you again, sir. Inside the lobby, the triage nurse turned entirely pale. Her jaw hung slack. Status on my wife, I commanded. My voice was no longer weak. The gravelly beggar's tone was gone. I spoke with the authority of a man who owned the air they were breathing. The Vanguard medical team is aboard the chopper, sir, Marcus reported sharply. Dr. Eris Thorne, the leading transplant surgeon in the hemisphere, is waiting inside. But we need to stabilize her first. Do it. Marcus snapped his fingers. 4 men rushed past the terrified security guards, carrying a state-of-the-art mobile life support gurney. They didn't ask for permission. They bypassed the hospital staff entirely, lifting Sarah's frail, cold body onto the white mattress. They hooked up IVs, monitors, and an oxygen mask in a matter of seconds. "Hey, you can't do that," the triage nurse finally stammered, rushing out from behind the glass. "This is a private hospital. You can't just—" Marcus stepped into her path. He didn't touch her. He just looked down at her with eyes like crushed ice. "Quiet," Marcus said. Just one word. It hit her like a physical blow. She shut her mouth instantly. A man in a wrinkled suit and an unbuttoned collar came sprinting out of the elevator. He was out of breath, sweating profusely. It was Dr. Evans, the chief executive officer of St. Jude's. "What is the meaning of this?" Dr. Evans yelled, looking at the helicopter, the armed men, and the chaos in his lobby. "I'm calling the police. This is highly illegal." I walked through the sliding doors. I stepped into the bright, sterile light of the lobby. I walked right up to Dr. Evans. He looked at me, taking in my filthy clothes, and sneered in confusion. "Who the hell are you? Get this vagrant out of here." "My name is Arthur Vance," I said softly. The volume of my voice was low, but the weight of it was suffocating. Dr. Evans froze. The color drained from his face, as if someone had pulled a plug in his feet. Everyone in the corporate world knew the name Vance. It was a ghost story, a myth. The unseen hand that controlled the global markets. "Vance?" Evans stammered, his eyes darting to Marcus, then to the men in suits, then back to my muddy face. "Arthur Vance of Vanguard Holdings? That's impossible. He's a billionaire. You're— "I am a man whose wife was dying on your floor," I said, stepping closer. 10 minutes ago, I begged your nurse for help. I begged your guards. They threw me out into the freezing rain because I didn't have $50,000. Dr. Evans looked at the triage nurse. She was shaking now, tears welling in her eyes as she realized what she had done. "Mr. Vance," Evans choked out, his arrogance crumbling into sheer terror. I had no idea. It's a protocol. It's policy. I swear to you, if I had known. You would have saved her because of my bank account." I interrupted, my voice turning to ice. "Not because she is a human being. Please, sir, let me fix this. Let us take her to the VIP wing. We will waive all fees." "You don't have a VIP wing anymore, doctor," I said. I looked at Marcus. Marcus opened the silver briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and handed it to Evans. "What is this?" Evans asked, his hands trembling as he took the document. "That," I said, "is a hostile takeover. Vanguard Holdings just purchased the parent company that owns this hospital. The deal closed 3 minutes ago. I bought your debt. I bought your building. I bought your medical licenses." Evans gasped, clutching the paper like a lifeline. "You bought the hospital? Over a deposit?" "I bought the hospital." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "So I could fire you. You are terminated, Dr. Evans. As of this second, get out of my building. But my career, my pension, security," I barked. My men stepped forward. They didn't gently grab him. They seized Evans by the collar and the belt, hauling him off his feet. "Wait, Mr. Vance, please." Evans screamed as they dragged him toward the exit. I turned to the triage nurse. She was sobbing, backing away from me, her hands raised in surrender. "And you," I said. She flinched. Please. I have kids." I was just following his orders. "You followed them with a smile," I said coldly. "Pack your desk. If you are on my property in 5 minutes, I will ensure you never work in medicine, retail, or fast food in this country ever again." She ran. I watched her flee down the hallway. The lobby was mine. The hospital was mine. "Sir," a voice called out. It was Dr. Eris Thorne, stepping out of the elevator bay. He was flanked by Vanguard medical personnel. "We have Mrs. Vance stabilized. We are moving her to the surgical suite. We have a matching donor kidney en route via private jet. She is going to live, sir." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 days. My shoulders dropped. The crushing weight of the sorrow finally lifted, replaced entirely by the adrenaline of vengeance. "Thank you, doctor," I said. "Keep her safe." "Always, sir." They wheeled Sarah away into the sterile, glowing corridors of the hospital. She was safe. She was surrounded by the best money could buy. I turned back to Marcus. "The target, sir?" Marcus asked, knowing exactly where my mind was going. "David," I said. Just speaking his name tasted like ash. "And Chloe. They think they are signing a merger with Vanguard tomorrow." Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. The shell corporation we set up for them took the bait. They have leveraged all their assets, their home, and their business to secure the upfront capital. They believe they are signing the final paperwork at Vanguard Tower tomorrow at noon." "Good. They have no idea you are Vanguard, sir. Should I cancel the meeting?" "No," I said softly, staring out through the glass doors into the dark, rainy night. "I want them there. I want them in the penthouse boardroom. I want them sitting in the leather chairs, drinking the expensive water, dreaming about their billions." I looked down at my hands. They were caked in mud, blood, and the grime of the streets. I looked at my torn clothes. "Marcus," I said. "Yes, Mr. Vance. Bring me a suit and a razor. It's time to go to work. Right away, sir." Marcus snapped his fingers again. A mobile command center, a massive, luxury Sprinter van, pulled up to the curb. I walked out of the hospital, leaving the chaos behind. I stepped into the warm, brilliantly lit interior of the van. It took 30 minutes. The mud was scrubbed away. The bleeding was bandaged. The wild, unkempt beard of a broken mechanic was shaved down to the sharp, clean jawline of a corporate predator. I stood in front of the full-length mirror inside the van. Marcus handed me a bespoke, midnight blue Tom Ford suit. The silk lining felt cool against my skin. I slipped my arms into the jacket. I adjusted the Windsor knot of my deep crimson tie. Marcus handed me a heavy, platinum Rolex Daytona, snapping it onto my wrist. I looked at my reflection. The old man crying in the rain was dead. The father who begged on his knees for his son's love was buried in the mud. Staring back at me was Arthur Vance, cold, calculating, untouchable. "Are we ready, Verser?" Marcus asked, standing by the open door of the van. "Pull their financial records," I ordered, my voice sharp, quick, clipping the ends of my words. "I want every loan, every hidden account, every credit card transaction. Want Chloe's hotel receipts. I want David's shadow ledgers. Find the rot. Document it. It will be on your desk by dawn, sir." They thought they buried me. I whispered to my reflection, adjusting my cuffs. "Sir?" I turned away from the mirror and stepped out into the night. The rain had stopped. The city was silent, waiting for my command. "They didn't know I was the Earth," I said. "Let's go take everything." Dawn broke over the city, casting a blood-red hue against the glass and steel of the Vanguard Tower. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my penthouse office on the 80th floor. I held a cup of black espresso. The porcelain was warm against my skin. It was a stark contrast to the freezing mud of the alleyway, a memory that still clung to the edges of my mind like a nightmare. 80 stories below, the city was waking up. The tiny yellow taxicabs looked like insects. The people looked like dust. For 20 years, I had walked among them. I had hidden my teeth. I had filed down my claws. Never again. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open with a quiet, expensive whoosh. Marcus stepped in. His charcoal suit was immaculate. Wek a man. He didn't look like a man who had spent the last 12 hours orchestrating the financial dismantling of a rising tech empire. He looked like he was bringing me the morning paper. He placed a thick, black leather dossier on the mahogany table. "The trap is set, Mr. Vance," Marcus said, his voice a smooth, flat baritone. "We have absolute visibility on every asset, every account, and every breath David and Chloe take." I turned away from the window. I set the espresso down. "Show me." Marcus opened the dossier. Inside was a web of absolute, irredeemable greed. To secure the minimum capital required to bid on the Vanguard City Development contract, David took a bridge loan of $50 million, Marcus explained, tapping a glossy spreadsheet. He used his tech firm, Apex Solutions, as collateral. But that wasn't enough to satisfy the bank's risk assessment. So what else did he leverage? I asked, my voice cold. Everything, sir. The $5 million mansion you purchased for him? A third mortgage. His stock portfolio? Liquidated. He has absolutely zero liquidity. If the Vanguard contract does not close tomorrow at noon, he will default by 5 p.m. The bank will seize the company, the house, and the cars. I stared at my son's signature on the loan documents. The boy was a fool, a reckless, arrogant fool playing a game of titans with a child's understanding of risk. He thinks he has the contract in the bag, I murmured. He does, sir. The shell corporation we used to court him assured him the paperwork is merely a formality. Marcus paused, his expression hardening slightly. But David's incompetence is not the most pressing issue in this dossier. It's his wife, Chloe, I said, her name tasting like poison on my tongue. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted audio tablet. He placed it on the desk. We tapped their phones, sir, as per your authorization. You need to hear this. This was intercepted 3 hours ago, right after they threw you and Mrs. Vance out. Marcus tapped the screen. A sharp burst of static filled the room, followed by the sound of ice clinking against a glass. Then, a voice. Chloe's voice, dripping with a sickening, lazy arrogance. God, pour me another one, Richard. I can still smell the old man on my shoes. My jaw clenched. The muscles in my neck pulled tight as piano wire. A man's voice responded, deep and amused. It wasn't David. You really threw a dying woman out into a thunderstorm, Chloe? That's cold, even for you. Oh, please, Chloe scoffed through the speaker. They were sucking us dry. They lived in the basement like rats. David was too much of a coward to do it himself, so I had to push him. The boy needs a spine, but it doesn't matter now. The Vanguard money hits the escrow account at exactly 1 p.m. tomorrow. And the wire transfer? Richard asked. Already set up, Chloe purred, her voice dropping into a dark, intimate whisper. The second Vanguard transfers the $50 million advance to Apex Solutions. My back-end script redirects $45 million to the shell account in the Caymans. David won't even see it blink on his screen. What happens to the golden boy? Chloe laughed. It was a vicious, echoing sound. He takes the fall. He signed the bridge loan. He signed the collateral. The SEC will investigate him for embezzlement. The bank will take his house, and he will go to federal prison. And you and I, Richard, will be drinking champagne in Monaco by Friday. He's an idiot. I've been playing him since the day I met him. You are a masterpiece, Chloe. The recording clicked off. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the platinum Rolex on my wrist. My son was a monster who threw his dying mother into the street. But he was also a blind, pathetic sheep being led to the slaughterhouse by a parasite. He had sacrificed everything. His family, his soul, his parents' lives. For a woman who was actively planning to destroy him and leave him in a cage. I didn't feel pity for him. I felt a dark, absolute rage. They thought they were players on the board. They didn't realize they were just the pawns, and I was the one moving the pieces. Marcus, I whispered. Sir, who holds the $50 million bridge loan? First National of Manhattan, sir. Buy the bank. Marcus didn't blink. The entire bank, sir? The entire bank, I commanded. The words clipped from my mouth like gunfire. Hostile takeover. Liquidate whatever Vanguard assets you need. I want controlling interest by midnight. I want that debt. I want to own the paper on his house. I want to own the paper on his company. Consider it done. What about their suppliers? I asked. pacing the length of the mahogany table. Apex Solutions relies on microchips. Who supplies them? A tech firm in Silicon Valley. Vertex Dynamics. Buy Vertex Dynamics. Cancel all active contracts with Apex Solutions immediately. Claim a breach of ethics. Leave them with no product to sell. Yes, sir. And Richard? I stopped pacing. I looked at Marcus. Who is the man in the bed with my son's wife? Richard Sterling, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions at a rival firm. He has a wife of 15 years and 3 daughters in private school. Send the audio file to his wife, I said coldly. Send it to his board of directors. Send it to his children's headmaster. Burn his life to the absolute ground before the sun sets. With pleasure, sir. Back to the window. The city looked different now. It didn't look like a landscape. It looked like a hunting ground. Marcus, when is the signing scheduled for tomorrow? Noon, sir. Right here in this boardroom. Send the official invitation. Make it grand. Make them feel like royalty. Rent a fleet of Maybachs to pick them up. Let them drink the best champagne. Let them inflate their egos until they are floating. I placed my hands on the cold glass of the window. They thought they buried me, Marcus. They were mistaken, Mr. Vance. They were right to try, because I am going to end them. Across the city, in the $5 million mansion that was no longer his, David Vance felt like a king. He stood in the center of his massive, custom-built walk-in closet, admiring himself in the 3-way mirror. He wore a brand-new, bespoke charcoal suit. He adjusted his silk tie, his hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the electric, blinding rush of pure greed. Today was the day. He was 32 years old, and he was about to sign a contract with Vanguard Holdings. He was about to enter the billionaire class. He picked up his phone. He opened his banking app. Available balance, 412s. He laughed out loud. It didn't matter. It was all leveraged. The mansion, the cars, the company. It was all riding on a knife's edge. But he had done it. He had outsmarted everyone. Resminked. He had outgrown the pathetic, small-minded life his father had tried to force on him. His father, for a fleeting second, the image of the old man's bloody knees on the wet asphalt flashed in his mind. The sound of his mother's rattling cough echoed in his ears. David squeezed his eyes shut and shook his head violently. No, he told himself. They were leeches. They would have dragged me down. To build an empire, you have to cut the dead weight. The bedroom door opened. Chloe walked in, looking like a goddess of vengeance. She wore a stunning, blood-red designer dress that cost more than most people's cars. Her diamonds caught the morning light, throwing fractured rainbows across the walls. You look tense, baby, Chloe purred, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. Just excited, David said, kissing her cheek. The Vanguard cars should be here in an hour. This is it, Chloe. We made it. Chloe smiled. Her reflection in the mirror met David's. Her eyes were completely dead. Yes, we did, honey, she whispered. Everything is about to change. Her phone vibrated in her designer clutch. She pulled away, checking the screen. A text from Richard. My wife locked me out. The board fired me. My accounts are frozen. What did you do, you psycho? Chloe's perfect, painted smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She swiped the notification away and blocked the number. Richard was a casualty. It didn't matter. The money was still coming. She didn't need him for the Caymans anyway. Is everything okay? David asked, noticing her pause. Perfect, Chloe lied smoothly, tossing the phone into her purse. Just the caterers for tonight's victory party confirming the menu. We are going to drink the city dry tonight, David. Suddenly, the heavy mahogany doors of their bedroom were thrown open. David's head of security, a massive former Marine named Cole, stood in the doorway. He looked panicked. Cole, what the hell? David snapped. Knock. Sir, you need to see this, Cole stammered, holding up a tablet. I don't know what's happening. The supply chain. David snatched the tablet. He stared at the screen. His heart skipped a heavy, sickening beat. An email from Vertex Dynamics. Effective immediately, all contracts with Apex Solutions are terminated. Shipments halted. All pending invoices are called due. What? David gasped, his chest tightening. They can't do this. We have a $50 million order pending. Call them. Threaten them with a lawsuit. I tried, sir, Cole said, backing up a step. Their entire executive board was replaced overnight. They were bought out. Bought out? By who? An anonymous shell corporation, sir. David's hands started to shake. The first crack in the ice. If he didn't have chips, he didn't have a product. If he didn't have a product, Apex Solutions was a hollow shell. But it didn't matter. The Vanguard money would cover the breach. He could buy a new supplier tomorrow. Fine, David barked, throwing the tablet onto the bed. Who cares? The Vanguard contract closes in 2 hours. Once we have the advance, I'll bury Vertex Dynamics. Get the cars ready, Cole. Yes, sir. Cole quickly left the room. David took a deep breath, smoothing his tie. He looked at Chloe. She looked slightly annoyed by the interruption, entirely unbothered by the supply chain collapse. Minor bump, David said, forcing a smile. Nothing can stop this. His phone rang. It was the bank. First National of Manhattan. David rolled his eyes. Probably calling to beg for our business once the Vanguard wire hits. He chuckled to Chloe. He answered the call and put it on speaker. This is David Vance. Mr. Vance, this is Mr. Sterling's office from First National. We are calling to inform you of a structural change regarding your loan portfolio. The voice on the other end was mechanical, unfeeling. Make it quick. I have a meeting, David snapped, puffed up with arrogance. First National was acquired at 3:00 a.m. this morning in a hostile takeover, Mr. Vance. The new parent company is restructuring all high-risk bridge loans. As your collateral, Apex Solutions has just lost its primary supply chain. Your risk assessment has been downgraded to critical. The color drained entirely from David's face. He felt the floor drop out from under him. Wait, what are you saying? David choked out. Your $50 million bridge loan has been called in, Mr. Vance. You have 24 hours to produce the principal amount in full, or the bank will seize the mansion, the company, and all attached personal assets. The line went dead. Weiss swallowed the closet. David couldn't breathe. His knees felt weak. He grabbed the edge of the marble island in the center of the closet to keep from collapsing. 50 million. Due tomorrow. If Vanguard backed out, he wasn't just broke. He was ruined. He would be on the street. Chloe's eyes widened, genuine panic finally breaking through her cold facade. If David's accounts were frozen, the transfer to the Caymans would fail. Her exit strategy was evaporating. David, Chloe hissed, grabbing his arm. Her nails dug into his suit jacket. What does that mean? What did you do? Nothing. I did nothing, David yelled, batting her hand away. His mind was spinning out of control. Someone is targeting me. Someone bought the bank and the supplier in the same night. That's impossible. Billions of dollars in liquid capital moving in hours. Who would do that? Chloe shrieked, her voice losing all its manicured polish. David stared blindly at the wall. I don't know. A rival. A titan. I don't know. Suddenly, a heavy, rhythmic thumping shook the mansion. David and Chloe ran to the bedroom window. Pulling into the circular driveway of the estate was not a fleet of Maybachs. It was a massive, armored, midnight black transport vehicle, flanked by 4 Vanguard security SUVs. Men in tactical suits stepped out, forming a perimeter around the house. A single man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped out of the lead SUV. It was Marcus. He held a silver briefcase. He looked up at the bedroom window. Even from 3 stories down, his eyes were piercing. David's phone chimed. A single text message from an unknown number. Vanguard is waiting. Do not be late. David looked at the phone. He looked at Chloe. The panic in his chest solidified into a desperate, frantic hope. It's Vanguard, David breathed, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. They sent the transport. This is it. This is the only way out. If we sign this contract, the advance pays off the loan, saves the company, and we win. We just have to sign the paper. Chloe adjusted her dress. She smoothed her hair. The predator in her recalibrated. Then let's go sign the damn paper, David. Pull yourself together. You look like a coward. David nodded quickly. He swallowed the bile in his throat. He put on his suit jacket. They walked downstairs. They walked out the front doors. Marcus was waiting by the open door of the armored transport. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just gestured for them to enter. David and Chloe climbed into the plush leather interior. The doors shut heavily behind them, locking with a definitive, mechanical clack. Back in the penthouse, I watched the GPS tracker on the massive digital wall map in the boardroom. The blinking red dot representing the transport vehicle was moving steadily through the city traffic, heading straight for my tower. I sat at the head of the massive 50-foot mahogany table. Wet, the room was shadowed, lit only by the ambient gray light pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The storm clouds were gathering over the city again. I picked up the encrypted satellite phone. I dialed a direct line to the VIP surgical wing at St. Jude's. "Dr. Thorne," I said softly when the line connected. "Mr. Vance, the surgery was a complete success, sir. Mrs. Vance's body has accepted the new kidney. Her vitals are strong. She is resting comfortably in the suite. She's going to be perfectly fine." A profound, heavy weight lifted off my chest. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. I breathed out. "Thank you, doctor. Double the security on her floor. Nobody enters except you." "Understood, sir." I hung up the phone. Sarah was safe. My wife was alive. The only thing left tying me to humanity was secure. Now, I could sever the rest. The heavy boardroom doors opened. Marcus stepped in, holding a tablet. "They have entered the building, sir. They are in the private elevator. They will be on this floor in exactly 60 seconds. "Are the cameras recording?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Every angle, sir. High definition. Audio is active." "Is the legal framework secure?" "Ironclad," Marcus confirmed, stepping to the side of the room, folding his hands behind his back like a shadow fading into the wall. "They have no leverage, no exit, Rand, no capital. They are walking into an execution." I stood up. I buttoned the jacket of my midnight blue Tom Ford suit. I adjusted my cuffs. I walked to the massive leather chair at the head of the table, but I didn't sit facing the door. I turned the chair around so it faced the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the sprawling, massive city that I owned. I sat down. My back was to the door. I waited. 30 seconds. The silence in the room was suffocating. It was the silence before a bomb detonates. 15 seconds. I thought about the mud. I thought about the copper penny hitting my forehead. I thought about Sarah being dragged by her collar. The anger didn't burn hot anymore. It burned absolute, freezing 0. 5 seconds. The chime of the private elevator echoed through the marble hallway outside the boardroom. 3 seconds. Footsteps. Heavy, confident, arrogant footsteps approaching the doors. 1 second. The heavy oak doors swung open. "Mr. Vance," David's voice called out, echoing through the massive room. His tone was a pathetic attempt at projecting confidence, masking the absolute terror underneath. "We are honored to take your money." I didn't turn around. I just stared at the city's skyline. The trap had snapped shut. Now, I was going to crush them. The boardroom was a cathedral of power, wrapped in glass and shadows. I sat in the high-backed leather chair, staring out at the gray, weeping sky of the city I owned. Behind me, the heavy oak doors clicked shut. Silence stretched. It was thick, suffocating. It was the heavy air right before the guillotine drops. "Mr. Vance," David's voice echoed across the 50-foot mahogany table. It was a pathetic, trembling sound wrapped in a cheap veneer of false confidence. "We are honored to take your money." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened to the sound of his expensive leather shoes stepping onto the plush carpet. I heard the rustle of Chloe's silk dress. I reached under the armrest. My finger found the pneumatic lever. I pressed it. The heavy chair slowly rotated. I faced them. The smile on David's face didn't just fade, it shattered. His jaw literally dropped. The color violently drained from his face, leaving him as pale as a corpse. He stopped walking so abruptly he nearly tripped over his own feet. Beside him, Chloe froze. Her eyes went wide, perfectly round with absolute, uncomprehending shock. Her fingers went slack. Thud, her $10,000 Birkin bag hit the floor. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the polished mahogany. I looked at the boy I raised. I looked at the suit he bought with blood money. "My money, David?" I asked. My voice was a soft, lethal whisper that carried across the room like a razor blade. "You already took it once." David's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. He looked at my midnight blue Tom Ford suit. He looked at the platinum Rolex on my wrist. He looked at Marcus, standing perfectly still in the corner like an executioner waiting for a signal. "Dad?" David finally choked out. His voice cracked like a terrified child's. What are you doing here? Did you sneak in? How did you get those clothes?" Chloe was sharper. The venom in her veins made her observant. She saw the absolute authority in my posture. She saw the Vanguard security guards standing outside the glass walls, completely ignoring my presence while staring intensely at her. "David," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling in raw terror. "Shut up, Dad. You have to leave," David stammered, stepping forward, his hands shaking frantically. "Arthur Vance is going to be here any second. If he sees you—" "I am Arthur Vance," I said. The words hung in the air, heavy, absolute, final. David stopped breathing. He physically staggered backward, bumping into Chloe. "No," David whispered, shaking his head. No. That's impossible. You're a mechanic. You live in a basement. You're Artie. Artie died in the mud 3 nights ago," I said, my voice dropping to a freezing sub-zero. "When you threw him out in the rain to watch his wife choke on her own blood." I pressed a button on the console. Clack, the heavy electronic locks on the boardroom doors engaged. The sound echoed like a gunshot. They were trapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I unleashed the storm with quiet, measured precision. Marcus stepped forward. He opened the black leather folder. He didn't look at them. He just slid the papers across the massive table. I fired the bullets. Short, fast, fatal. The Vanguard contract. I stared dead into David's panicked eyes. "Denied," David gasped, clutching his chest. "Your $50 million bridge loan." I pointed to the second paper. "Called in, Dad. Wait!" "Your house." I didn't stop. "Foreclosed 10 minutes ago. Please, your tech company." The words hit him like a physical beating. "Liquidated. Your suppliers are gone. Your assets are frozen. Your cars are currently being towed off the estate you no longer own." David collapsed. His knees hit the carpet. He put his hands on his head, hyperventilating, tears immediately streaming down his face. "No, my company, my life. I built that. You built nothing." I finally raised my voice, and it sounded like thunder in the enclosed room. "You built a house of cards on the spine of your mother, and now I am burning it to the ground." Chloe snapped out of her shock. The predator inside her realized she was backed into a corner. She shoved David out of the way and ran to the edge of the table. "Arthur, Mr. Vance," Chloe cried out, forcing tears into her eyes. She put her hands together in a desperate plea. "It was him. It was David. I told him to give you the money. I begged him to let you stay." But he forced me. You know how controlling he is. Please, don't punish me for his cruelty." David looked up at her, utterly bewildered, betrayed by the very snake he had worshipped. "Chloe, what are you saying?" I looked at her fake tears, her pathetic, transparent lies. I tapped the tablet on my desk. The audio recording played through the boardroom's surround sound system. Loud and crystal clear. "He takes the fall. He signed the bridge loan. He signed the collateral. The SEC will investigate him for embezzlement. And you and I, Richard, will be drinking champagne in Monaco by Friday." The recording stopped. The silence that followed was apocalyptic. David stared at Chloe. The absolute devastation on his face was almost painful to watch. The empire he thought he built, the woman he thought he loved. It was all a complete, humiliating illusion. He was nothing but a mark. A fool. Chloe turned paper white. She backed away from the table, her hands covering her mouth. "Richard is currently sitting in a holding cell downtown," I said to her, my voice dripping with disgust. "The board fired him. His wife locked him out. When that offshore account in the Caymans you thought you were escaping to?" I looked at Marcus. "Seized and drained, sir," Marcus stated flatly. "The balance is 0. Chloe let out a gut-wrenching shriek. Her legs gave out. She dropped to the floor, her beautiful red silk dress pooling around her like spilled blood. She clawed at the carpet. "No, my money, my money," she screamed, sobbing hysterically. "I can't be poor. I won't go back to being poor." "You aren't going back to being poor, Chloe," I said coldly. "You are going back to being nothing." David dragged himself forward on his knees. He crawled toward the head of the table. He was a broken, weeping mess. The arrogant CEO was completely gone. In his place was a terrified little boy. "Dad, Dad, please," David sobbed, his face slick with tears and snot. He reached out, trying to touch the edge of my desk. "I'm sorry. God, I am so sorry. I was blind. She poisoned me. I'll do anything. I'll clean the floors. I'll take care of Mom. I'm your son. You can't do this to your own flesh and blood. Please." He wept. He begged. Just like I had begged outside the restaurant. I looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. Well of a father's love had been permanently poisoned. I stood up. I buttoned my suit jacket. "You killed my son," I said. David looked up, his eyes bloodshot and pleading. "No, I'm right here. You killed my son the night you left my wife in the rain," I roared, the anger finally breaking through the ice. "The boy I raised died in that mansion. I have no son. I only have a parasite that I have finally surgically removed." I turned my back to him. I looked at the window. It had started to rain again, cold, unforgiving rain lashing against the glass. I looked over my shoulder at Marcus. "Security," I commanded. The side doors flew open. 4 massive men in black tactical gear marched into the room. They didn't hesitate. They didn't gently guide them. They grabbed David by the armpits, hauling him off the floor like a sack of garbage. 2 others grabbed Chloe, who kicked and screamed like a feral animal, her manicured nails scratching uselessly against their Kevlar vests. "Dad, no, please, don't let them!" David screamed, his voice tearing his throat as they dragged him backward toward the doors. "Arthur, you monster, let me go!" Chloe shrieked. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the city skyline. "Throw this trash out on the street," I ordered quietly, my voice echoing off the glass. "It's raining. They'll need a head start." The heavy oak doors slammed shut. The locks engaged. Their screams were cut off instantly. The boardroom was silent again. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the air was finally clean. The rot had been excised. I stood by the window for 5 minutes. I watched the street 80 stories below. The front doors of the Vanguard Tower opened. 2 tiny figures were violently hurled out onto the wet, freezing pavement. They hit the ground hard. Second later, a tiny black square, Chloe's Birkin bag, was tossed out after them, landing directly in a massive, muddy puddle. They lay there in the rain, exactly where they had put us. Zzzt, zzzt. My encrypted phone vibrated in my inner pocket. I pulled it out. It was a direct line from the VIP wing of St. Jude's Hospital. I answered. Vance. Mr. Vance, Dr. Thorne's voice came through, warm and relieved. She's awake, sir. The new kidney is functioning perfectly. Her color is back. She opened her eyes 2 minutes ago. My breath hitched. The cold, ruthless Titan faded into the shadows, and the husband returned. She's asking for you, sir. She's asking for Artie. A genuine smile, the first I had felt in what seemed like an eternity, broke across my face. Tell her I'm on my way, I whispered. I hung up the phone. I took one last look at the 2 miserable figures shivering in the rain below. I didn't feel anger anymore. They were ghosts. They no longer mattered. I turned away from the window. I adjusted my cuffs, walked out of the boardroom, and went to see my wife fade to black.